Welcome to this Killik Explains finance video. This week, notice the terminology I'm using, a new tax year's resolution for ISA investors in particular. This is a resolution that can apply to all investors, but particularly relevant to anyone investing in an individual savings account. Now, new tax year. So what am I saying here? I'm saying we're just past the 6th of April. So we're into the 2018-19 tax year, and I'm going to suggest that there is something you can do to make your life easier this tax year that you may have not done during the last one. What is that exactly? Well, let's take a look. So, March Madness has just gone by. What I mean by March Madness is people wake up around February, March and think, crikey, I haven't used my annual ISA allowance and I've only got a few weeks to do it. And that's because ISA allowances are use it or lose it. Unlike the pension allowance, for example, you can't necessarily carry forward unused allowances from, say, the previous 3 years. It doesn't work like that. It's use it or lose it with ISAs. So, people think, crikey, I haven't used my ISA allowance, better get a wiggle on. Particularly if you're an equity investor watching the tax-free dividend allowance drop last year from 5,000 to only 2,000 this year, people are thinking, crikey, actually there is a place for ISAs and it shelters capital gains and so on. So many investors kind of make a huge panic rush at the end of the tax year to get their accounts set up, get money transferred in before that 5th of April deadline. I'm suggesting there is another way, and it's worth thinking about right now. Now is the time to think about it, even if you've just closed off your tax-effective investing for the previous tax year. And that is, why not start to use your annual allowance, which is £20,000, so it's quite generous, all right, earlier in the tax year. And the benefits, I'm going to run through a few of these in a bit more detail, are less administrative stress, pound cost averaging is an option if you get in early in a way that it isn't if you leave it all till the last 2 weeks in March. Your money can compound for a full extra tax year. If you think about it, it'll be working for you earlier than it would be otherwise, and reduced cash flow pressure in terms of finding the money you need to invest right before the end of the tax year. So let's run through one or two of those in a little bit more detail. Pound cost averaging, first of all. So this is a constant debate amongst investors. Do I drop a lump sum into the market all in one go if you're lucky enough to have a full £20,000 ISA allowance, or do I kind of drip it in over the course of the year? Now, in terms of performance, it's an it depends. So let's take a look at one example. If you had £12,000, let's say, to invest now for 5 years, and you make an assumption about the market. Now, stock markets have tended to rise over the long term. So let's say you can earn 5% per year. Not guaranteed, no promise, just a purely illustrative number. Say you could earn 5% per year, about the amount the Barclays Equity Gilt Study suggests over the last 50 years equity investors in the UK have averaged, let's say. After 5 years, I reckon you'll have, from your £12,000 opening investment, a fairly handy £15,315. So, happy days, if you like. Now let's say, obviously you don't know what the market's going to do at the point you make the investment. So let's rewind and say, okay, let's do a drip feed. So let's take the £12,000, divide it down into £200 chunks per month, and drop that into the market on a sort of regular standing order basis, let's say. So you'll benefit from a rising market, but a bit less, because the money's going in a little bit later, if you like. Let's assume you get the same 5% per year, so we're comparing apples with apples. At the end, you've made some money, but you're up to 13,618. So you might say, well, that's case closed. Surely I need to drop in lump sums. Well, maybe not, because where are we now? If we were to look, there's a number of ways we can look at this, but let's look at the VFTSE index, a volatility index based on the UK market. You can see that throughout 2017, it remained fairly flat as the market sort of steadily kind of rose. If I was doing a chart of the FTSE, if you like, you'd see that. And then suddenly, bang, started 2018, particularly February right there, massive spike in volatility, stocks a lot more wobbly, and I suspect that's a pattern that may well continue for a few months, if not a bit longer from here. So we're in a different environment, and that changes potentially your approach to lump sum versus drip feeding. Why? Let's take a look at that. In a volatile market, here's a quick comparison. Now, by volatile, what I mean is if you look at these, so what I've done is to say, let's look at some different periods here where we might invest money, and let's look at what I've called the unit prices, and you can see they dip. So they start at £5, drop to 4, then to 2, and then recover again. So there you go, there's a bit of downside volatility. If you took a lump sum approach with £1,000, that would buy you, at £5 per unit, 200 units, all right? And you'd still have 200 units at the end, because with this approach, you just buy what you can and hold on to it. So you still have 200 units at the end of the piece, and if you multiply that by the unit price, you're back to your £1,000 if you like. Now, here's someone who takes the £1,000, divides it into £250 chunks and drips it into the market. And look what happens. So you start by buying 50 units. That's 250 divided by 5 if you like. Period 1, when unit prices drop, you can buy a few more, 62.5. Period 2, you can buy a lot more at a price of £2. Period 3, 62.5 again. So if you look at where you'd be at the end, just in terms of the number of units your money has accumulated, the same £1,000, just invested differently, you'd have around 300 units. So you'd be in a lot better position, potentially, priced at £5 each. So there's my point. In volatile markets, a drip feeding approach can add quite a bit of value. And it has other benefits too, of course. That being that you save yourself the kind of stress of, do I go into the market now or don't I? Now, long-term investors shouldn't worry too much about that, but they do. They get to March and think, is this month a good time to invest? And they might hesitate. All right, well, with a drip feeding approach, standing order approach on a monthly basis, let's say, that stress is taken away from you, plus a few others, by the way. Now, compounding. So I'm suggesting on an earlier slide, there's another advantage, which I've kind of hinted at back there, which is if you invest at the start of the tax year, you've got 11 or 12 months, if you like, for your money to compound. Whereas if you leave it till the end, you're missing out on that during each of those periods, if you like, the subsequent periods. So this is a point. Now, where would you be if you'd invested your full ISA allowance each year for the last 10 in the FTSE All-Share Index? Now, chosen the FTSE All-Share Index just to make the point. Now, what I'm about to show you is not guaranteed in the future, can't make that promise, but what if you'd done that, where would you be if you'd invested at the start of each tax year or at the end of each tax year? So kind of mid-April plays the following mid-March, let's say. And the answer is this. Now, there are a few assumptions under here. It's pre-charges, no costs included and so on. That's what the blurb at the bottom's saying. But head-to-head, basically, based on the last 10 years, FTSE All-Share, you'd be about £10,200 better off, which is significant given the total size of the account at the end. And those two numbers at the top are just comparing somebody who's gone in at the start of each tax year versus somebody who's gone in at the end. And if you're wondering how those two numbers compare to the actual amount you'd have had to have put in yourself from your pocket, well, there's the line around £123,000. Now, that's not guaranteed. Stock market performance can change, your capital's at risk and all that kind of stuff, but it just illustrates the potential power of going in at the start rather than the end of tax year. Now, less hassle and stress. So just finish up with this. There are some other benefits to not waiting, and they're pretty self-explanatory, but they're worth bearing in mind. The cash flow headache is solved. You don't have to rush around liquidating other investments, for example, thinking, I've got to get money into my ISA. The timing headache's resolved for you, that kind of, do I go into the market in March? Is now a good time? Will the FTSE crash? And all that kind of stuff. People do worry about it, even though I try to persuade them they shouldn't as long-term investors. And the processing headache, will the firm that I'm giving my money to be able to handle the processing before the end of the tax year? Will it hit the right account? You take all of that away, of course, if you act a little bit earlier. So, my New Year's resolution, as we enter a new tax year, is very simple. Think about getting your act together a bit quicker this tax year. It'll take away a lot of the stress at the end of the tax year, and it could actually have some benefits in terms of where you are at the end of your investing exercise. So, to email me on quite a lot of ground covered, it's the usual address, which is editor@killik.com. And if you want to watch other videos on tax-effective saving, please go to killik.com/learn and click on the tab that's got that name.